My name is Hannah Smith, and I'm presenting the three pieces that I chose from the gallery tour that we did last week, how I've connected to them, and how I'm connecting them to the poems by E.A. Robinson. Firstly, I chose Quantum by Betsy Evie. Uh, I've specifically chosen this one and not the one next to it because my personal connection to this work is that I just really like the color blue. But I also enjoy the way how these layers of beeswax and oil have been melted and spread and smeared and moved all around on the panel, where you can see the layers built up over time, and it's almost not completely opaque, and you can see through the different like colors that have been added onto the work. I also really appreciate how the like lightest blue, almost periwinkle, I want to say, ribbons have been laid on top and they seem almost highlighted in comparison. I just really enjoy that contrast and it's very visually interesting to me. Evie talks about her work having a connection to her materials in that if you read the booklet that was given at the front desk, she gives a story about how there was a shipwreck around the area where she was born carrying luxury goods that were meant for Mexico, but instead they had crashed near where she was born, and a lot of the beeswax blocks that were on the ship were meant to be used for Catholic candles, and she just really enjoys the story behind that and like how that connects to her. Um, Moving on, this one here, Moon by Anne Gardner. I when I do photography, I really enjoy like the reflections of glass on certain objects where something about like the shine and the way the light hits it is very interesting to me. And with this work, I noticed how it was just kind of off in a corner, but this one to me is one of those pieces that was the most like labor intensive and I don't want to say difficult to produce, but for lack of a better word, um, it glass blowing is a very difficult process, and you can look up videos online to see what I'm talking about. But it's just a lot of moving back and forth, and you're in a hot shop, like trying to. I mean, first of all, stay cool, but also to make the object that you're trying to create. And I really enjoy how like a lot of heat and pressure was added to this melted glass to create these forms, and they look soft and flowy as a result. I'm connecting this piece to Miniver Chibi because in the poem, E.A. Robinson writes about this man, Miniver Chibi, and he's generally loved by all, most people, everyone in the poem. There's not a single person who would oppose this in the poem about how he is generally seen as a good person. He is a rich person who puts his best dress on and talks relatively relatable to everyone, and no one really has any bad things to say about him. But because of this, they place him on this pedestal where no one else would really take the time to get to know him better. They just see him as a good person from afar. And by the end of the poem, he takes his own life because of this. And I'm relating this to glass blowing because it looks generally like it looks really beautiful on the outside. There's a lot of texture and detail on the work. It has a general like soft form and it's very beautiful to most people. You would see it in like very fancy establishments as an example, like chandeliers and things like that. And it takes a lot of hard work to make. But also because of it being glass and it has to be melted and shaped, there's a lot of intense labor that goes into this. It's a lot of moving and forming the glass and blowing into the tube on one end to form the inside of it and expand it outwards. So I'm making a pun here with internal pressure in that Miniver Chibi feels a lot of internal pressure and conflict with loneliness, and glass blowing having literal internal pressure in that it has to expand the form of the glass. Lastly, I chose Ray by Katie Stone. It's several, like a lot of drops of acrylic paint on Duralar, and then it's strung up and held by thread and pins. And I made a joke here about light as a theme for this work being in both energy and weight, in that these pieces of Duralar are really light, but also it feels like a ray of light. Um, the details about the work, the artist in her statement, also in the book, talks about how there's a lot of duality in her work, and also that the painting itself with the acrylic being not on a frame, not in this rectangular form that we're used to. When you hear art, most people think of painting immediately. But with her work, she is painting on these pieces of Duralar and stringing them up. And technically speaking, it would be a painting, but not in the literal sense that it's this rectangular form. She also she talks about the duality in her work, in that the form that she's creating represents more like petals and leaves and this ray of light. And it's very natural looking and very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm gonna go with natural. It's very natural looking. And there's a sense of like organic versus synthetic, and micro versus macro, real and imaginary, moving and still. And this is specifically being made with plastic and thread and pens. This is artificial, this is human made, but it's representing these more natural things that you would find out in the environment. And I find that really interesting. I did not change the emotional connection on this. Ignore that. My emotional connection to this is that I visited it in the gallery when we went, and the AC was on at the time. So it blowing onto these individual pieces of plastic and Duralar, it made the petals or leaves move in a certain way, and it looked like falling leaves, and I found that really interesting. Why I chose these pieces specifically. I know that during the tour, I had been talking about one piece by Shauna McDonald in particular, actually like two or three, the painted water droplets on this panel. I do have a intense argument about that one, but these pieces in specific I chose because I found a connection between them, and I found that really interesting and I wanted to share. So with these pieces, I found the connection with like all three are being formed with heat in some way, in Ray with like the individual pieces of plastic, and Evie's work with this melted wax and oil being dripped onto the canvas, and then glass blowing being an intense process to actually melt and shape the glass. And then with the effect of light on these pieces, there's a difference in like the quality of light depending on the time of day that you see these pieces. And I've been told that they can like shift and change in the way that we perceive them depending on the time of day that you look at them. Um, and also the effect of light directly on the pieces, in that glass has a certain shine to it that I enjoy, and the transparency of the layers of the wax works. I also got a sense of movement and flow between all three, in that the wax is quite literally being moved and shaped and scraped and moved around on the panel, and the movement of the AC and the light hitting the ray and these pieces of plastic. If I were to go back and look at these pieces, I'd look closer at how heat and pressure has formed each of these works, because I'm interested in this connection between them. Thank you.